Welcome to another deep dive. Today we are looking at the aftermath of Reverend Jesse Jackson's passing.
Right. And specifically, we are examining that monumental public memorial service.
Yeah, the one held on March 6th, 2026 at the House of Hope Arena in Chicago.
Exactly.
And, I mean, we all know the broader headlines regarding his death last month. He was 84, and he passed from a rare neurological disorder.
Right.
But today is really about getting past the standard obituaries. We have gathered this huge stack of on-the-ground news reports, comprehensive articles, and personal accounts from the actual day of the memorial.
Because the goal today is to look at the true mechanics of this farewell. We are going to examine the localized impact in Chicago versus his massive global footprint.
Which is such a crazy contrast.
It really is. And we'll also dive into the deeply personal anecdotes shared by the political figures in attendance and the intense real-time political climate that completely enveloped the ceremony.
Okay, let's unpack this. To understand the gravity of the event, you first have to visualize the physical footprint of the memorial itself.
Yeah, it was massive.
Right. The House of Hope on Chicago's South Side is this sprawling venue. It holds 10,000 people.
10,000.
And on the morning of March 6th, thousands of people were lined up outside, wrapping completely around the building in the crisp Chicago air.
Just waiting to get in.
Yeah, and you had choirs singing gospel music outside. The crowd was this incredible mix of high-profile dignitaries and everyday citizens who just felt a profound, almost magnetic pull to be there.
And one detail from the on-the-ground reporting really stands out here. It's about a man named James Hickman.
Oh, the guy from Atlanta.
Exactly. He lives in Atlanta, and he drove roughly 34 hours
Wow.
down to South Carolina and then all the way up to Chicago. And the thing is, he didn't even have a ticket to get inside. He just went to stand on the pavement outside the arena.
But he wasn't simply standing there to absorb the atmosphere, right? He was actively participating.
Yeah, he was outside selling $10 commemorative posters that he had personally designed. They outlined the entire chronological history of Jackson's life.
Which is amazing.
And he even mentioned to reporters that he was perfectly willing to give them away for free to anyone who couldn't afford the $10.
So why do that?
Yeah.
Why make a grueling 34-hour drive just to stand outside?
Well, when a journalist asked him that exact question, Hickman's answer was striking. He said he couldn't just go to local stores or big retail chains to get this specific type of historical information.
Right.
He felt this deep sense of duty. He literally said, it's our job to tell our own stories.
I love that. And that DIY, grassroots dedication outside the arena forms such a remarkable contrast with the scene playing out inside.
Oh, completely.
Because beyond those doors, this was not merely a funeral service. It was a gathering of modern American political history. You had three former United States presidents sitting right together: Barack Obama, Bill Clinton, and Joe Biden.
A historic summit, really.
Yeah, and beside them were former Vice President Kamala Harris, along with former First Ladies Jill Biden and Hillary Clinton.
And the cultural weight extended far beyond just the political sphere, too.
Right. You had filmmaker Tyler Perry in attendance. There were powerful vocal performances echoing through the arena from Jennifer Hudson and Opal Staples.
And former basketball star Isaiah Thomas even took the podium to offer a bit of levity.
Oh, right. He pointed out the obvious reality that any ceremony boasting a lineup of this magnitude was absolutely guaranteed to run well past its scheduled time.
What's fascinating here is how the presence of all these figures, particularly the former presidents, really acts as a visual representation of the architectural foundation Jackson laid for modern democratic politics.
You're talking about the presidential runs.
Exactly. You have to look back to his campaigns in 1984 and 1988. That was when he built the Rainbow Coalition.
Which was huge.
And at the time, this was a highly radical, disruptive concept. The strategy was to actively mobilize millions of entirely new, disenfranchised voters.
Right. He brought together marginalized communities, working-class white Americans, farmers, organized labor all into a single political bloc.
He wasn't just running for office, he was fundamentally changing the math of who was allowed to participate in the electoral process.
And former President Obama leaned heavily into that specific legacy during his eulogy.
He did.
When Obama took the stage, to a massive standing ovation, by the way, he drew a direct line from Jackson's campaigns in the 1980s to his own historic election in 2008.
He compared Jackson to the biblical prophet Isaiah.
Yeah, describing him as a man who, when the poor and marginalized needed a champion, consistently stepped forward and said, "Send me."
But the emotional core of his speech was deeply personal. Obama credited Jackson with proving to the country that a black man unconditionally belonged on a presidential debate stage.
Right, and the phrasing Obama chose to use in that moment was highly calculated and deeply evocative.
He stated that Jackson's presence on that debate stage sent a powerful message to a 22-year-old child of a single mother with a funny name.
He was, of course, talking about himself.
Exactly. Obama was illustrating that Jackson systematically dismantled the invisible barriers that told outsiders there were certain rooms they simply could not enter.
Yeah.
By proving that a black candidate could command national attention and secure millions of votes, Jackson permanently altered the psychological landscape for the next generation of political leaders.
Now, we're about to get into the actual speeches from the podium, and it's impossible to ignore the intense political crossfire that took place.
It was definitely a major theme.
So, to you, our listener, because our sources contain politically charged content from both left-wing and right-wing perspectives, we want to be incredibly clear. We are not taking any sides or endorsing any of the viewpoints we are about to discuss. We're simply here to impartially report on the ideas contained in the original source material.
That context is vital because a central theme of the source reports is how intensely polarized the rhetoric became.
Yeah.
This was undeniably a memorial service, but Democratic leaders utilized the platform to vocalize severe alarm over the current political trajectory of the country.
Right. Former President Obama used a significant portion of his eulogy to issue a stark warning to the audience. He stated, "Each day we wake up to some new assault on our democratic institutions."
He elaborated on this by arguing that science and expertise were currently being denigrated in American society,
while behaviors he classified as ignorance and corruption were instead being rewarded.
Then former President Joe Biden was equally pointed.
Very pointed. Focusing his remarks directly on the current Trump administration, Biden told the assembled crowd, "We've got an administration that doesn't share any of the values that we have."
And he explicitly added that he did not believe he was exaggerating the situation in the slightest.
Then former Vice President Kamala Harris took the podium and approached her remarks from a slightly different, maybe more strategic angle.
She earned a massive standing ovation of her own.
She did. And she explicitly referenced her unsuccessful campaign against Donald Trump. She told the 10,000 people in the arena, "I predicted a lot of what is happening right now."
Yeah, she said, "I hate to say I told you so, but we did see it coming."
Harris also emphasized the vulnerability she felt in navigating this current political environment without Jackson's historical guidance.
And the tone of the event escalated even further when Reverend Al Sharpton took the microphone.
Sharpton utilized his time to fiercely criticize several recent policy shifts,
specifically pointing to what he characterized as the killing of illegal immigrants and the aggressive cutting of the Affordable Care Act.
And in a moment that really underscores how the line between a memorial and a political rally was blurred, Sharpton actually led the massive crowd in a resounding, echoing chant of, "We won't go back."
Now, to ensure we are capturing the complete picture provided by our on-the-ground sources, we must also examine the White House's official response to this gathering.
Right, because President Trump did not attend the memorial service.
The White House cited scheduling conflicts as the reason for his absence. However, the administration did not let the speeches go unanswered.
No, they issued a direct, forceful response targeting the remarks made from the podium, specifically honing in on former President Obama.
White House spokesman Stephen Chung provided a direct quote to the press corps regarding the memorial.
And what did he say?
Chung referred to Obama as a total disgrace for all the hurt he has caused this country, and he went on to state that history will not judge the former president well.
So you have this incredibly solemn, gospel-filled celebration of a civil rights icon playing out, while simultaneously an intense, real-time political clash is dominating the news cycle surrounding the event.
It is a jarring juxtaposition.
It really is.
But it functions as a perfect mirror for the deeply fractured state of modern American politics.
How so?
Well, we are currently operating in an environment where even a memorial service for a historical figure inevitably becomes a critical battleground for competing ideological values.
Yeah, you can't escape it.
The underlying tension in the country is so pervasive that it naturally saturated the House of Hope arena that afternoon. It demonstrates that the core of Jackson's life's work wrestling over the moral and political direction of the nation remains an active, highly volatile conversation today.
Here's where it gets really interesting, though, because as much as this memorial served as a massive political sounding board, the moments for the speeches that truly resonated were the ones that peeled back the curtain.
The personal stories.
Yes. The speakers shared these quiet, almost hidden anecdotes that took place far away from the microphones and the television cameras.
The personal stories that humanize the historical figure.
Exactly. For instance, former President Bill Clinton took the podium and shared a story about the 1998 impeachment crisis.
Which was arguably the most stressful, chaotic, and publicly humiliating period for his presidency and his family.
Right. And right in the middle of this massive political firestorm, Reverend Jesse Jackson called the White House.
Now, in that context, the assumption would naturally be that a prominent political operator like Jackson is calling the president to discuss survival strategy.
Or public relations, or how to manage the optics of the scandal.
Exactly.
But Clinton revealed that Jackson had absolutely no interest in discussing strategy with him. Jackson told the President of the United States, "I don't want to talk to you. I want you to go get Chelsea."
Wow.
Jackson was calling the White House specifically to speak to Clinton's college-aged daughter. He wanted to pray with her on the phone and make sure she was keeping her head in the game, while her entire family was being dragged through this unprecedented public ordeal.
That's incredible.
Clinton pointed out that considering the massive global issues Jackson was juggling on a daily basis, it wouldn't have even occurred to most high-level operatives to pause and check in on a politician's daughter.
That specific brand of private empathy is remarkable, especially in a town as transactional as Washington.
Clinton even told the crowd that he was attending the service not as a former president, but as a friend who remembered that kindness.
But equally revealing is the anecdote Obama shared regarding Jackson's relentless, almost stubborn drive, even as his physical health was severely failing him.
Oh, the hotel story.
Yeah. Obama recounted visiting Jackson in his final days at a hotel in Chicago's Hyde Park neighborhood. Knowing that Jackson was suffering from a debilitating neurological disorder, Obama assumed he was walking into a quiet, low-key visit to pay his respects to a man who simply needed to rest.
But Jackson apparently had an entirely different agenda for that visit.
Obama walked into the hotel room, and instead of a quiet retirement scene, Jackson immediately started pitching new projects.
I love that.
He was actively suggesting specific phrasing for upcoming initiatives, demanding that Obama look into particular policy issues, and even pitching the idea that they co-write an op-ed article together. He was grinding right up to the final moments.
And his son, Yusuf Jackson, confirmed that exact behavior during his own remarks at the memorial. Yusuf shared that his father spent his final months obsessively urging him to mobilize local churches.
For the food drive, right?
Yeah, Jackson wanted to organize a massive food drive for people who had lost their food assistance during a recent government shutdown. Yusuf recalled his father telling him, point blank, "I intend to die with my shoes on."
And the reporting confirms he meant it literally. Even when the neurological disorder impaired his speech so severely that he had to rely on hand signals just to communicate with his own staff, Jackson was still showing up to his office late into 2025.
That's just relentless.
It is. And it is crucial to understand why these specific anecdotes matter to our broader understanding of history. When monumental figures pass away, society has a tendency to flatten them into untouchable mythical statues.
Do you remember the booming speeches, the protest marches?
The black and white photographs and textbooks. But stories like the private phone call to Chelsea Clinton or the makeshift strategy session in a Hyde Park hotel room actively dismantle that myth.
Yeah.
They reveal a deeply flawed, complex human being who was privately empathetic during moments of extreme personal crisis and relentlessly driven even when his physical body was completely giving out.
That complexity really shines through when you look at the sheer duality of how he lived his life. On one hand, he was a larger-than-life global diplomat. On the other, he was just a fiercely loyal guy from the neighborhood in Chicago.
The contrast is truly unique. On the global stage, as Illinois Governor J.B. Pritzker pointed out during the service, Jackson operated as an ambassador of hope who routinely met with kings, queens, presidents, and dictators.
And what I don't fully understand is the mechanics of how a civil rights leader with no official government portfolio manages to execute international diplomacy.
Right.
The sources outline this incredible trip he took right before the 1984 Democratic National Convention. Jackson embarks on a tour of Central America and Cuba. He actually secures a face-to-face sit-down with Fidel Castro.
And personally negotiates the release of 22 American prisoners, bringing them safely back to the United States.
How does a private citizen even facilitate that level of negotiation outside of the State Department?
It speaks to the immense soft power of international celebrity combined with moral authority. Jackson understood that foreign leaders, even adversarial ones like Castro, recognized his massive influence over the American public and the media. He leveraged that independent clout to open diplomatic back channels that official government bureaucrats simply couldn't access. But if we connect this to the bigger picture, you see that his massive global footprint never erased his stubbornly grounded local routines.
While he was negotiating hostage releases internationally, he remained deeply tethered to his community in Chicago.
The sources feature an amazing profile of the Valois restaurant in Hyde Park that illustrates this perfectly.
Yes, the cafeteria-style place.
For over 40 years, Jackson was a fixture at this restaurant. He would walk in, sometimes twice a day, and sit at the exact same spot, the fifth table on the right.
And he maintained a standard order of scrambled eggs, grits, and sausage patties.
The owner, Gianni Colamucci, considered Jackson a genuine friend. On the day of the funeral, Colamucci actually reserved the table closest to the television in the crowded restaurant and streamed the entire memorial service so the local regulars could watch together.
And that exact same scene was playing out just down the street at the Hyde Park Hair Salon. Longtime barber A.C. Chandler and his clients spent the entire afternoon watching the broadcast on the shop's televisions.
They weren't just passively watching a historical event either. They were pointing at the screen, actively recognizing their friends, neighbors, and colleagues in the crowd.
They were looking for members of Rainbow PUSH.
Right, which stands for People United to Save Humanity, the social justice organization Jackson founded and headquartered right there in Chicago. Jackson was exceptionally skilled at translating his high-level philosophical activism into highly practical local economics.
That economic focus brings up the story of Thomas Finch. According to the reporting, Finch was standing outside the House of Hope Arena wearing his Omega Psi Phi fraternity jacket.
Jackson became a member of that historically black fraternity back in 1960.
Right, and understanding the networking power of the Divine Nine fraternities and sororities is key here, because Finch owns a video services company that provides massive, billboard-sized video screens for major events.
He was actually outside the arena providing the overflow broadcast screens for the thousands of people who couldn't get inside.
But the underlying reason he was there providing those screens is the crucial part of the story.
Exactly.
Finch told reporters that when he was trying to get his business off the ground 30 years ago, he kept hitting a brick wall. He couldn't secure contracts at the massive venues in Chicago, like the Hilton or McCormick Place. The doors were firmly shut.
But Jesse Jackson utilized his leverage to force those doors open.
Yes. Jackson actively pressured these massive corporate entities to alter their vendor policies and make room for small, Black-owned businesses.
And because of that direct intervention, Finch's business exploded.
He went on to secure contracts for NASCAR events, 2 Democratic National Conventions, and the dedication of the Martin Luther King Jr. Memorial in Washington, D.C.
Finch noted that at events like the Million Man March, without his big screens, nobody in the back would have been able to see a thing. Jackson made that visibility possible.
This perfectly bridges the gap between the philosophical fight for civil rights and the practical, everyday reality of economic empowerment.
Jackson recognized that securing a seat at the lunch counter was only the first step.
Right.
The ultimate goal was ensuring his community had the capital to own the restaurant, manage the supply chain, and operate the media companies broadcasting the event.
It is fundamentally about persistent action. Which brings us right back to you listening to this deep dive right now. What is the practical application of this historical breakdown for your own life?
That's the real takeaway.
While analyzing these sources, I kept coming back to a quote from a man named Arthur Dennis. He is a 33-year-old member of the PSH Coalition who was getting his haircut at that Hyde Park salon while the funeral broadcast played.
He posed a rhetorical question to the reporter that is hard to shake.
He did. He said, "It's one thing to show up for a day, but how do you show up for a lifetime?"
That is the ultimate challenge posed by analyzing a legacy of this magnitude.
So what does this all mean? It means that true, lasting impact isn't just about the highlight reel. It isn't just about delivering massive, historically significant speeches or attending a 10,000-person memorial service.
It is about the persistent, daily, unglamorous action of showing up.
Whether you find yourself advising the President of the United States on a global crisis, picking up the phone to comfort a friend's daughter during a scandal, or throwing your weight around to ensure a local video contractor gets a fair shot at a hotel contract, the legacy is in the daily work.
This raises an important question, though, something to consider as we close the book on these sources. We spent this time discussing Jackson's ability to build massive physical coalitions. He went door to door, diner to diner, and church to church to build the Rainbow Coalition.
Yeah,
He leveraged face-to-face analog relationships to change the political math.
right.
The articles note that due to his neurological disorder, Jackson spent his final years communicating via hand signals because his speech was impaired.
Which is heartbreaking, but incredible that he kept going.
Exactly. So if one of the greatest, most booming oratorical voices of a generation loses his physical voice, yet still manages to organize, write, and inspire presidents until his dying breath, what does that say about the true nature of influence?
Wow.
Are we too focused on the volume of our voices in society and not focused enough on the relentless clarity of our actions?
That is exactly what we mean when we talk about finding those aha moments. A huge thank you to you, our listener, for joining us on this deep dive today. We hope you walk away from this analysis feeling more informed, a little inspired, and ready to look at the mechanics of history through a much wider lens. Keep exploring, keep questioning, and keep seeking out the knowledge that truly matters. We'll catch you on the next deep dive.